Good afternoon. Thank you for joining this session on employee engagement. Um, I enjoy working with Team Neo and thank them for the opportunity to speak on this really important topic. I would say that these are interesting times. We've heard that a number of times today to talk about changes in the environment, changes in our companies, changes in employee engagement. We find that this is a time when most people are looking at how do they either grow their company or how do they actually save their company, and there seems to be very little in between. This is a unique time for people to actually take on new projects to expand and grow their opportunities, and we think that employee engagement is a critical piece and critical component of growing anybody's company. So I'd like to start off by introducing myself. My name is Dave Mustin. I am a partner and a vice president in the Marcum Technology Group based here in Cleveland, Ohio. So I've been doing consulting for more than 25 years, and those tend to focus on opportunities for business growth, using technology more efficiently to create profitability and competitiveness situations with our clients. I've got tremendous experience in manufacturing, distribution, and many other industries as well. And for those of you who haven't heard about Marcum, we are the former Skoda Minotti company that has been in Cleveland for well over 40 years. So Skoda Minotti joined Marcum last December. And while we're first and foremost thought of as an accounting and advisory organization, we have many different market segments, and I happen to be in the technology segment of that. There are four components of Marcum's technology area. One is managed services, which wraps around infrastructure and technology. We have a comprehensive cybersecurity unit focused on remediating issues, doing penetration testing, diagnostics, even support for litigation and forensics in many Fortune 500 mid-market companies. We have a digital advisory group that is focused on leading edge technology and things like advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, system integration, and even ERP systems. And then I happen to head up our strategic consulting group. And our strategic consulting group is focused really and truly on solving our clients' business issues, and we just happen to use technology to go solve those issues. So our purpose for this discussion today is that we find that many organizations launch large-scale change projects without taking into account the impact on the employees. And those change projects could be anything from an Internet of Things project. It could be deploying new technologies such as machine learning and artificial intelligence initiatives in place. It could be all the Industry 4.0 initiatives that we're talking about. It could be a new ERP or CRM or e-commerce technology. But in all those projects, what we tend to find is that the employees quite often get left out. And what happens is the employees sense that they're not a part of the project, and they will check out of and not participate in those projects. Quite often it's unconsciously, sometimes it's consciously, because people in organizations have full-time day jobs. And their first priority is to either get production out the door and service customers. It could be to take new sales orders and service clients. It could be to process invoices and accounts payable and accounts receivable. It could be to make sure machines are producing at full capacity. And the challenge becomes if we don't bake the employee into the equation from the beginning, we run the risk that employees can unconsciously or inadvertently undermine the success of that project. And these stories have played out year after year as we hear about stories about large-scale ERP projects failing at a pace and a clip of potentially 60, 70, 80% of them failing on a regular basis. And historically, these projects have been very expensive, and they can encompass millions or tens of millions of dollars of expense. And to run the risk that we lose those projects, that they fail and fail to achieve objectives, is a significant waste of both time, talent, and investment. And it is incredibly important for us to realize that there are things that we can do about it. So what I like to do is step back for a second and talk to you about Industry 4.0. And if you look at the components of Industry 4.0, we think about things from cybersecurity, which is, in all honesty, one of the most important topics our clients that come to speak to us about this day and age is how do I make sure my work, my systems, my people, my environment is secure. The shift to cloud computing and moving data outside what we perceive as a protected environment within our own environment out to what appears to be a higher risk environment out in the cloud where we don't necessarily have direct control of our data. And I will tell you, our clients are very concerned about releasing that data from outside a protected environment into a cloud environment. Big data has become a rising concern as there's so much data in our ERP systems and our CRM and our e-commerce. How do we make sense of it? And how do we start to understand the impact of what this data tells us, not just about what happened last week, last month, but what's coming down the road over the next 3 to 6 months and make better decisions out of this? How do we simulate our operating environment, understand ways to improve that, and use things like artificial reality and virtual reality to understand and see what's happening for training purposes, simulation purposes, to understand what capabilities. How do we understand better about the Internet of Things, and how do we connect sensors to technology and to devices? I have a client that about 9 months ago took over an IIoT project, and they had previously set up many smart sets of equipment on the shop floor. They have about 200 large machines on the shop floor, and they had previously turned on all that data flow into their network, and it crashed their network. And they were looking for an IIoT solution to better manage all that information flow and make better decisions out of it. You can see other categories that flow into Industry 4.0, such as augmented reality, robotics, additive manufacturing, and system integration. And they all have different aspects of the environment and the impact on employees, the effect to make decisions, to get high quality products out the door. And what we find is that this is an incredibly challenging environment to navigate because there's so many moving parts all at the same time. Now, as we try to make sense of Industry 4.0, what we really want to know is that the industrial Internet of Things is just a network of devices that connect things like vehicles, appliances, phones. They have sensors that connect environmental factors, that connect to electronics, ERP systems, and they provide much greater real-time information. And that in this day and age right now, as we talk about touchless environments, the Internet of Things is becoming far more important to be able to detect in real time what problems might be occurring on the shop floor, and to be able to understand how we can monitor things from a distance. So when management may be off-site, there's a huge opportunity for the Internet of Things to create great insights for management to understand what's happening in real time, to be alerted to their phone about what's happening and how do they make a difference. Now, when we talk about the industrial Internet of Things, there are many, many different sensors out there that detect position, velocity, temperature, volatile gases, humidity, acoustic sounds. And based on the intelligence that's wrapped in there, there's a tremendous amount of data that's produced that allow things to happen to be transitioned from a digital environment into a real-time environment. So to set off a fire sensor could set off a water suppression or a fire suppression unit and make that happen. And so we see tremendous amount of opportunities to install industrial Internet of Things and machine learning and big data and all this kind of technology out there for Industry 4.0 make a huge impact on organizations and our clients. Now, we lay out projects that start out by looking at the organization and trying to understand all the key components of the organization. We'll look at customers. We'll look at the industry and competitors. We'll look at your operations. We look at processes and technologies such as lean and continuous improvement and Six Sigma and 5 Whys. And we'll start talking about your ERP environments and return on investment and KPIs and processes and decisions. And we look at the resources you have, the technical staff and the operations staff and infrastructure, and your direction, your vision, your commitment. And all these components of the systems and the projects are really important. But I want to stop for a second And if you think back about the 4 slides I've just covered, about the capabilities of Industry 4.0 and sensors and the components in the slide, and this is the way many projects start. But the challenge is in starting these projects, what we haven't really done is explored and examined the interests of the employees in the organization. And if we start a project out this way and don't stop and step back and think about the people on the shop floor and the people in the back office and the salespeople out in the field who are trying to get their work done, we run the risk that the people in the organization are no longer committed to the outcomes of the project, because as we've seen in these slides, very rarely do we talk about the employees. And even on this slide, we talk about technical staff as a resource or an entity, and the operations staff as a resource or an entity, and not how these projects affect those employees going forward. As I was preparing for this presentation, I came across this article in Industry Week. And this headline, I think, sums this up in a very succinct word, is that in any organization, trust of the employees in the organization is far more important than technology in any digital transformation initiative. And if we lose that trust, and if we break that trust with our employees, it is very likely that we'll see that project hit that 70 to 80% failure rate more likely than not in our organizations. And so it's important that in any project we take on, we engage our employees, build that trust that they have a role in that project and they have a role in that outcome. Because all too often, when we look at projects, we install projects, and the employee's first thought is they're going to be laid off. And if you walk around the shop floor of today, this is what you see. You see employees working together, doing engineering and production activities and touching products and moving products down production lines and repairing equipment and working hands-on in a high-touch environment to get products out the door to serve their clients. I did a project a number of years ago for BMW. And in the discussions with the employees at BMW, the pride in working for that organization was intense. It was almost a mythical level of how proud they were to be able to put that brand, not just on the car, but on their resume. And these people are emotionally attached to that company and were willing to take long hours and even lower pay. I've had employees at BMW come up to me and tell me that they're willing to take lower pay because they worked for BMW. And as we look at the screen of these employees working the shop floor, what they're really concerned about is this, the factory of the future. And if you look at this picture of an automobile assembly line, what they're concerned about is there are no people on that factory floor, and that the work is being done by robotics and artificial intelligence and machine learning. And what they're very concerned about is that if they don't have a future in these production factories, why should they contribute to the projects that run the risk of outplacing them? And so if they don't have a future on the other side of the bridge of the future, why should they help build the bridge that will put them out of work and out of a job? And so we need to recognize that from the very beginning, that for a lot of employees in the shop floor, there is fear that any new high-tech project will put them out of business. Now, they are very concerned about this gap as well. So in smart manufacturing projects, what we find is every wave of new technology that comes along tends to evolve the technology faster than humans' ability to adapt to it. Across the bottom, you'll see a curve that says technology that's sweeping up to the right, and sweeping up much faster than the next line up. This is human adaptability. And so what we see is technology is adapting much faster than humans are able to. And as you see that sweep out to the right, that green gap right behind where it says we are here is that the gap between humans and technology is increasing. And humans perceive that they're falling further and further behind technology. And every time we go to install a new ERP system or a new CRM system, there is a concern that people will lose their jobs. They will get outplaced. Their job skills will get downsized. That is a huge concern in large-scale modern manufacturing industries. And if you heard stories about high-tech manufacturing out of companies like Tesla, the concern is, and whether it's truth or reality or not, the concern of employees that they will be outplaced and that their jobs will be sidelined and they will lose their ability to adapt and lose their ability to have meaningful work and have jobs. And the threat from China and Asia has already impinged upon them. Now the threat that they can lose their jobs from technology is growing ever faster. So there are a few important concerns to understand. First and foremost, that employees go through rapid degrees of change, and there is an actual reaction, a physical reaction to that. This graphic on the left of this page comes from a book that was written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, not on change management, she wrote this on the grief that comes from death and losing a loved one. And she says that in these stages, as you lose a loved one, people go through various stages of loss. And it starts out with denial. I didn't lose them. They're not gone. They're coming back. Then they go through anger that they've lost this person. Then they go through a stage of depression. And then they go through bargaining. It's like, okay, but I need this and I want that. And then finally they get to a stage of an acceptance. Well, these stages directly mirror the stages that employees go through as massive amounts of change hit them. Because what they knew in the past, the way they did their jobs, the people they knew, the people they worked with can go away. And people go through these exact same stages. And this model underpins all theory of employee engagement and change management to this day. And so when you recognize that you take away things from people, or you force them to adapt to new systems and new technology, new responses, the people in your workforce will go through these stages. And you've probably seen it. People start denying the change isn't coming. It's a flavor of the month. The leadership isn't committed. We've tried this 10 times before and it hasn't worked. And then you see people going through depression and they don't come in for a day or two, or they slow down. And if we hold out long enough, we don't have to comply. And our objective is to help employees get through these stages to be able to get to an acceptance where they're better off. And what I'll tell you is there are tools we can use to help them get through these stages of change that will help your employees come through that successfully, bought in, committed, and fully engaged around these change projects that are going on. And here are the 6 pillars we look at when we think about it. And the 6 pillars seem simple enough, but can be incredibly important and also difficult to execute against. And it starts with vision and leadership. It starts with understanding where the organization is going and where the organization will end up and how the organization ends up better off, and that there are leaders that are committed to reinforcing that message to the entire workforce of here's where we're going and here's why we'll be better off. Communication that comes from the top to all members of the organization is reinforced on a regular basis of here's how we're progressing. It is truth and transparency. It's about we're having problems, but here's what we're doing about those issues. It's on a regular basis reinforcing that people have a place in that new future. It is about giving employees the knowledge and capabilities to move into that new future. It's about training them and giving the skill sets and the reinforcement. It's about giving them the right tools to do the work. You can't ask a line person to go on the shop and put nuts and bolts on a car wheel without the proper wrenches and tools. And you can't ask those people to adapt to a new change initiative without giving the proper tools to adapt to that. One of the more important things that gets forgotten is what are the incentives for the employees to participate. Most employees in a change initiative have a full-time day job. They're working in the shop. They're selling products and goods. They're answering customer calls. They're processing accounts payable and accounts receivable. And a new project comes in and adds the workload. So what do they get out of it? And quite often, they feel like they're left behind because they're left with double or triple work. They're in an uncertain work mode where they've spent 10, 20 years building skill sets. That's going away. So they're left uncomfortable because the things don't work anymore. And the question goes, what do they get out of that? And then fundamentally what they need is an action plan that says, we will be doing this here, and then this, and then this. And we have to remember that plans are just plans. Plans change at times. Much like we leave on a driving trip from Cleveland to Chicago, we may make intermediate stops along the way. It's important to communicate that we're making a stop and why we're making a stop. We're changing the route we're going on. We're stopping for food. We need to communicate that back to our employees and help them to understand why we're doing what we're doing and why that's being driven. And fundamentally, what our employees want to know is something that's called WIFM. And WIFM stands for what's in it for me. Every employee in a change initiative in the back of their head, whether they tell you this or not, is asking, what's in this for me? What do I get out of this? Why should I change my work habits? Why should I change my activities? Why should I change my muscle memory in order to do something different? And why am I better off for having done that? And until we recognize that every single employee is asking what's in it for me, and we then spend time answering those questions, we're going to have a gap between the reality that's happening and what our employees are trying to motivate and make happen go forward. So I'm going to give you just a little quick deeper dive in these 6 dimensions, because this is critical to get your employees and your organization through this. We're going to start at the top, go down the right-hand side, and then sweep up the left side. So around vision and leadership, it's important that every project start with a meaningful vision of the future. And what that means is, why are we going through this trouble and this difficulty, and ask our employees to change, and here's why the organization will be better. We need to understand that's not just how the organization will be better, but how the employees themselves will be better for having gone through that. And we need to engage a team to deliver against that vision and build what's called cascading sponsorship. Now, I used to work with an organization where I was working with the CEO, and the CEO talked about the frozen middle. Not in a derogatory term, but it meant that as the senior leadership would cascade messages down to mid-management, the mid-management didn't always understand what was being done and why, because the senior leadership wouldn't communicate clearly. And at that point, messages would get muddled. And so you need to find strong middle managers that you can check back in with on a regular basis and make sure they understand the messages. And then as the executives send the messages to the mid-managers, those mid-managers can appropriately send that message to the line staff. It's much like telephone tag with a string cans that you play as a child. One person would tell the next person a message, to the next person, to the next person, and the message would get muddled as it moved from person to person. Without clear communication, clear vision, clear messages, things would get broken along the way. And it's really important to talk about what's in it for me to each employee as you go through that. Managers need to prepare to answer the questions from the staff about why and what's in it for each staff person as you make these changes. You need regular updates. You address frequently asked questions on a regular recurring basis. Now, if you have employees that have been with your organization for potentially 5, 10, 15 years, most of your employees have probably built strong muscle memory. And what that means is they can go out and do that job. And if they're on the shop floor, they know what wrenches to turn. They know what things to assemble together on a regular basis. They know how to set those CNC machines. They know what sensors to check on a regular basis. And now you're asking to change all that stuff they can do unintuitive. Picture if you're driving a car And you suddenly go from the steering wheel on the left to the steering wheel on the right. All the places you look and the knobs and controls and dials, and those things change, and how hard it would be to drive the car. Now, I'm going to go back to BMW for a minute. And about 5 to 7 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, BMW changed the location of all their controls for the entertainment systems and capabilities. And people panned the decision to change the user interface pretty readily. And because people had a really hard time adapting, that car design change took a while for people to accept it. And that's what we're asking people to move through when we ask them to make a change and we don't give them all the knowledge and skills and capabilities and tools to adapt to it. Unless we empower your team and your client's team with the right knowledge and tools to make the adjustments, they will check out and they will not support the change going forward. It is important not just that you give them knowledge and tools, but you test them on that and verify that they're making the adaptation. One of the things that happened in a change process is coming out of a go live status. I have yet to see a project that doesn't go through a dip in productivity as we shift off the old system or project into the new environment. We have to expect that's people's timing to go through the adjustment process of relearning and re-embedding muscle memory to get this stuff right. And we have to give people time. One of the way of determining that you return back to a normal operating process is when help desk tickets around either ERP systems, new sensors, new technology, new environments, they will go up immediately after a go live. And as you go back to normal over the next 2, 3, 4 months, all those help desk tickets will return back to normal. And when you see a normal volume, you know you're starting to get people back to normal processing environment. So check that on a regular basis. Incentives are really important. Quite often in a large-scale change project, what I find is that people go from working an 8-hour day to a 10 or 12-hour day because extra things are asked of them. And what happens is as people switch tasks from a recurring transactional process to a project-oriented activity, they have a switching cost of switching in and out. And it's harder for people to work in that environment. And it's very important to let people know there are incentives to make it through. Incentives can be any number of things. Incentives could be rewards and recognition. It could be money. It could be new jobs. It could be a promotion. One of people's biggest concerns is that their job could be eliminated by a new change initiative. And they want to know that they have a safe landing spot on the other side, that they're going to make it through, hopefully better off than they were before the change initiative. So it's important as you plan these projects out that in the very beginning, you talk about what those rewards can be and how your people will be better off. I was in a client kickoff meeting this morning at 11 o'clock today, and we talked about incentives for the employees making it through the change initiative and how important that was. And the employees' metrics for making it through the project were going to be measured and then rewarded on a regular basis coming through that. So organizations are looking at it very clearly. And finally, action plans of what's going to happen, who's doing it, when's it happening, how's it affecting people, and understands other competing priorities in the organization. If this Industry 4.0 initiative is large, recognize where critical people in the organization may have other large-scale projects that go on at the similar time. As a consultant, if I ever have to reach an accounting unit of Marcum, I have to be aware of any tax deadlines that occur, and then I may not be able to tap into some of my tax professionals to do things. And so I have to do a little workaround to be recognizing what's happening. If you have end of month sales quotas and your salespeople are wrapped up trying to close deals, it's important to recognize the last 2 or 3 days of the month, Your salespeople may not be available to you, and work around that and take that into account for deadlines and activities and how you're planning things. Now, to give you one more vision of this, here are the 6 key components: vision and leadership, communications, knowledge, tools, incentives, and action plans. If you have all 6 of those elements together, we believe it gives you a very good foundation for project success. But if you're missing some of the pieces, different things will happen to your project along the way. Without a vision and knowing where you're going, your employees will be incredibly confused about where you're going and what they're supposed to do and how they're contributing to the projects going forward. With no communication, they don't know what's happening. They're going to reject the project. They will check out because they don't feel like the project includes them. If they don't have knowledge and don't know what to do, they're going to have fear and they will check out as well. If they don't have the right tools, they get frustrated because, again, you're asking people to turn nuts on car wheels without the right wrenches. They can't successfully accomplish what you're asking them to do. Without the right incentives, they're going to move slowly. They're going to prioritize other projects ahead of this one. Things they know what to do on a regular basis will come first because it's easier. It's intuitive. They know those things along the way. And if they don't have action plans, you're going to get chaos because things will not get done in the right times, at the right order. People won't know what to do when. I had one client call me in. They had a number of initiatives working out at the same time. But what would happen is everyone was backing everybody else up. So an issue would come up and everybody would run at that and try to go solve that simultaneously, which means people were creating conflict and rework and overwork. Clients would be getting multiple calls about the same issue from multiple people, and chaos reigned supreme. And the frustration in this organization was incredibly high. We need to address all 6 of these elements in a concerted, methodical plan to make this stuff work. Now, a couple key engagement principles, I suspect you know this. People will follow the leader. So goes the leader, so goes the staff. Now, I've had clients where there was expectations the staff were going to work late into the evening to get a project done on a timely basis. But the senior executives were leaving at 4:30, 5 o'clock. And yet there was not an understanding why the employees weren't staying late to get the work done. They saw the leaders leaving early, and so the employees left with the leaders. And so whatever the leader says may not get followed. They may follow what the leader does instead. So be aware that actions sometimes speak louder than words. It's really important to understand that commitment is higher for employees and those things that they get the chance to help build, they have input into. Where you can engage your employees and they can do the project themselves, as opposed to having it done to them, the commitment level will be much higher. People want to know the direction so they can participate, engage, and have a voice in activities. They want the knowledge. They want the action steps. They want to engage in these things. People do really want to participate. Now, a few of the challenges I've seen all too often that people want to replicate the past rather than build the future, because that's what they know. That's what they're comfortable with. And in any change initiative, it's really important that we communicate the future and help them understand that they can move into that future and help them build that future. Otherwise, they're going to replicate the past. People, because of muscle memory, have a tendency to do it the way they used to. We need to get them through that. And fundamentally, people want to know what's in it for themselves. And we have to help them through all these challenges and opportunities. Now, another way to think about this is what's called a change adoption curve. This was built by an organization called Organizational Development Resources back in the mid to late 90s. And what they believe is that there's stages of adoption of moving up these curves. And any one of these stages, employees can check out. If they check out, they fall to the bottom, and you'll see some of those things that can happen in a project. And it's only as you move through building preparation and awareness, building understanding and a positive perception of the project, we get acceptance. And only as you get it, the project components installed and institutionalized, will people really drive the change that they need to get to. All right. Now, I've talked through a number of use case examples, but when people have buy-in and commitment, they're far more willing to be engaged and participate in these processes. I think we're going to leave these slides and make the slides available to you so you can see this case example out there. What I would say is take the time to take the readiness assessment that Team NEO set out there for the IIoT project. What it does focus on levels of engagement inside your organization and client organizations, and talks about where you are for organizational support and adoption and uses of IIoT and workforce readiness. There are much more components in there about making sure your team is ready than we've thought of in the past. Please go to this website, take the readiness assessment, understand where you fit and where the key issues around employee engagement. And I think you're better off for any industrial 4.0 projects, IIoT projects, and other aspects. So at this point, I'd like to see if there are any questions out there.
Yes, David. We have one question from Ellie, who's with us today. How do you motivate the professional team to increase their productivity when they work online?
Well, that's a really, really good question, because we think if professional people are off-site, they're less productive. And I'd say, how do you motivate people when they're in your organization and keep them going? We have a little bit of an issue right now. There's some additional distractions out there when people are working from home. People may tend to go to the water cooler a little more, the refrigerator a little more. There's other distractions around them. But I think the question is, it still is, here are deadlines coming up. Here are the incentives. Here's the work we have to get done. We lost the ability actually years ago to direct command and control over workforce. And the objective is around measures and metrics to help people know what's expected of them, clear communications and understanding, and to help people understand what their roles are. I had a great conversation with a client about 2 months ago, and I was helping them through employee evaluations. It was the first time they'd ever done that. And the real revelation I had is that for one of the senior leaders in the organization, he never sat down with his employees and set expectations about what his expectations were and what the staff people's expectations were. And what we discovered in the process, there was a significant gap between the senior leadership and the staff. And because of that gap, people didn't understand what was expected of them. So I think it starts with communication and having conversations around expectations, around timing. Working from home is not an excuse to not work. People are still depending on other people just because you can't see them. You still have to get work done in a regular, productive manner. And it's probably the one thing I'd reemphasize is communications becomes all the more important because we're not bumping into people in the halls. It's more important to reach out and have regular communications. I have regular communications set up with my staff that I talk to them on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis to make sure I touch it with every single one of them to make sure I understand what their questions and concerns are. So communications, communications, communications. Neil, is there any more questions?
We haven't got any more in the chat, but I am encouraging the audience to direct their questions to you or Erica after the session. Thank you so much, David. It's been great information here. And that brings this breakout session to a close. So I hope the audience enjoyed it today.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.